Level 1. Street-level crime. Think of this as the basic entry point, where crime is mostly about quick cash, survival, or just being caught in a rough environment. It's the kind of gritty reality where someone like Jeremy Meeks started out, getting caught for minor heists or street-level hustles long before a single mugshot changed his life. At this level, it's all about the small-time players, the pickpockets, the shoplifters, and the neighborhood dealers, who are taking big risks for relatively small rewards. You aren't seeing any mastermind schemes here. It's just the raw, unpolished side of the streets where the law is a constant shadow over your shoulder. This chaotic energy usually stems from a lack of options, turning everyday people into desperate characters like Billy the Kid in his early days, just trying to navigate a world that feels rigged against them. The crimes here are often messy, impulsive, and local, involving things like petty theft or small-scale brawls that barely make the evening news. There's no fancy equipment or high-tech hacking involved. It's just boots on the ground and quick fingers, where getting caught is usually just a matter of time. It's the kind of hustle that keeps you on edge because one wrong move means a direct trip to the local precinct. Connecting this back to the bigger picture, these small crimes often act as a training ground for people who eventually aim for the top, much like how a young Al Capone started with small-time street gangs before ruling Chicago. You're dealing with the most visible part of the criminal world, the part that most people encounter in their daily lives or see on a police scanner. It's low-level, high visibility, and usually driven by the immediate need for a few bucks or a bit of local street credit. Even if you're good at it, the ceiling is pretty low, and the risk of a long prison sentence for a tiny payout is always looming. Ultimately, street-level crime is the most relatable yet dangerous tier because it's the most unpredictable and lacks any real protection. While someone like Frank Abagnale was busy with high-level scams, the street-level guy is just trying to make sure he doesn't get spotted by a patrol car while snatching a phone. Level 2. Local gang leaders. Once you've graduated from the chaotic grind of the streets, the next step up is trading those impulsive heists for a position of actual authority in the neighborhood. This is the moment where you start climbing the ranks like a young James Whitey Bulger, who learned early on that real power isn't about working alone, but about controlling the environment around you. You aren't just out there pulling random jobs anymore. Now you have a dedicated crew, ready to move on your command to protect your turf or collect dues. At this level, your world shifts from just surviving to ruling, where your word becomes the law for everyone in your immediate circle. This level of leadership means you have to be smart about managing a small team whose loyalty is unquestionable when it comes to doing the dirty work. Imagine the position of someone like Raymond Washington when he first started forming his influence. He knew that to be respected, you had to balance providing protection for the locals with striking absolute fear into your rivals. You're overseeing small-scale distribution, protection rackets, and making sure no outside crews dare to step into your territory without your explicit permission. It's a high-stress management job because you're constantly watching for subordinates who want to overthrow you while playing cat and mouse with the local precinct. Building on that growing influence, being a local gang leader means you've started to build a brand that people either respect or tremble at the mention of. Someone like Stanley Tookie Williams understood exactly how to use local charisma to unite the youth in his blocks into a solid, feared force. At this stage, your life is less about dodging random patrol cars and more about figuring out how to cozy up to community figures so your business keeps running smoothly. You become the judge for every dispute in your area, from turf wars to keeping the peace just enough so the cash keeps flowing into your pockets every single week. Ultimately, being the boss of a local gang is the first real test of how well you can handle power before entering the big leagues. When a figure like Ellsworth "Bumpy" Johnson was first establishing himself, he knew that the wider your territory gets, the more heads you have to manage to make sure nobody starts singing to the feds. Level 3. Professional hitmen. Moving up from the messy business of leading a local crew, this level is where crime stops being about territory and starts being about cold, surgical precision. You aren't managing a loud gang or fighting over street corners anymore. You've become a specialist, like Richard Kuklinski, who operated with a chilling detachment that treated every high-stakes contract like a routine day at the office. At this stage, your name isn't whispered in the streets, it's feared in the hidden boardrooms of the underworld, because you are the one they call when a problem problem needs to disappear forever. It's a shift from the chaotic violence of a gang leader to the silent, calculated work of a professional who leaves absolutely no trace behind. This level of expertise requires a type of discipline that most common criminals simply can't handle, much like the legendary focus of Leonid Rezetnikov during his peak operations. You aren't just a shooter, you're a ghost who spends weeks studying schedules, security flaws, and exit routes before making a single move. Whether it's using long-range tools or more intimate methods, every action is a masterpiece of dark engineering designed to ensure the target never even realizes they're in danger. You operate in the shadows of the elite, often taking orders from people who wouldn't be caught dead in the same room as a street thief, making your anonymity your most powerful shield. Building on that reputation for absolute reliability, being a professional hitman means your entire life is defined by a strict code of silence and extreme isolation. Think of the mysterious aura surrounding someone like Glennon Engelman, who famously lived a double life as a quiet dentist while moonlighting as a highly effective contract specialist. At this stage, you don't have friends or a crew to rely on. You only have clients and targets, and the line between them is often razor thin. You've mastered the art of blending into any environment, from high-end galas to grimy industrial docks, ensuring that by the time anyone realizes a crime happened, you're already long gone. Ultimately, reaching the rank of a professional hitman means you've traded your soul for a level of lethal efficiency that very few can match. While a guy like Charles Manson relied on the chaotic influence of a cult to do his dirty work, a true professional relies only on their own skill and the cold certainty of a contract fulfilled. Level 4. Financial and political puppeteers. While a hitman waits in the cold for a single target, you're sitting in a climate-controlled penthouse, deciding the fate of entire nations with a flick of your pen. You've traded the silencer for a smartphone, moving into the big leagues like Jordan Belfort did when he realized that manipulating the stock market is way more efficient than any street-level heist. At this stage, your crimes aren't measured in shell casings, but in the billions of dollars siphoned through complex financial loopholes that even the feds struggle to track. It's a complete shift from the physical danger of the field to the psychological chess match of a high-level manipulator who treats the global economy like a personal piggy bank. This level of influence requires a terrifyingly deep understanding of how power flows through the veins of society, much like how Bernie Madoff built an empire of absolute trust that was actually a massive invisible trap. You aren't just stealing anymore. You're managing the perceptions of the elite, moving funds through offshore shell companies, and ensuring that every politician on your payroll stays loyal. Whether it's insider trading or lobbying for laws that favor your illegal monopolies, every move is a calculated strike against the very system meant to regulate you. You operate in the bright lights of prestigious galas and corporate boardrooms, making your criminal nature invisible to the public while you pull the strings behind the scenes. Building on that layer of legitimate power, being a puppeteer means your crimes are so sophisticated they often don't even look like crimes to the untrained eye. Think of the strategic genius of Ivan Boesky, who proved that having the right secret is worth more than any physical bank robbery. At this stage, you don't fear a local patrol car. You manage federal regulators and buy the silence of major media outlets to ensure your narrative is the only one the world hears. You've mastered the art of white-collar warfare, where a single phone call to a senator can be more devastating than a dozen professional hits, securing your place at the very top of the social food chain. Reaching this rank means you've successfully traded raw violence for a type of systemic control that can last for generations. While someone like Victor Boot was busy dealing in physical hardware and guns, a true puppeteer deals in the currency of influence and information that keeps the entire world spinning in their favor. Level 5. The Godfathers. Forget the spreadsheets and the legal tricks of the puppeteers. You've moved into the realm of absolute loyalty, where your word is literally the gospel for the most dangerous people on earth. You've reached that legendary status like Carlo Gambino, a man who never had to raise his voice because a single nod from him could settle a war or start one. At this stage, you aren't just a criminal or a businessman. You are a father figure, a judge, and a kingmaker all rolled into one, building an empire on the bedrock of blood, tradition, and an unbreakable code of honor. It's a transition from being a high-level manipulator to becoming a cultural icon whose influence is so deep it outlives your own physical presence. This tier of power is about having a reach so wide that you have sons and soldiers embedded in every major industry, much like how Vito Genovese centralized control to become the boss of bosses. You aren't just managing cash flow anymore. You're managing an entire legacy, ensuring that the families under your wing stay unified and profitable while you settle disputes that would trigger total chaos. Your presence acts as a stabilizing force in the underworld, and your personal protection is the most valuable currency anyone can hope to possess. You operate from a position of untouchable respect, where even the federal agents trying to take you down have to acknowledge the sheer gravity of your command. Building on that aura of invincibility, being a godfather means you are the ultimate arbiter of life and death, much like the silent but deadly authority of Joe Massino during his peak. At this stage, you don't need to commit crimes yourself. Your very existence is a challenge to the state because you represent a parallel government that the law can't fully dismantle. You've mastered the art of omerta, making sure the wall of silence around you is thick enough to stop any investigation dead in its tracks. You don't fear the spotlight because you own the people who shine it, turning your organization into a shadow state that functions with more efficiency than the actual government. Securing this position means you've successfully elevated crime into a form of high-stakes royalty that commands respect across the globe. While someone like Paul Castellano focused heavily on the corporate side of the life, a true godfather understands that power is nothing without the deep-rooted loyalty and fear that comes from being the head of the family. Level 6. The drug kingpins. Picture a tactical nuke hitting the criminal underworld, wiping out the old codes and replacing quiet respect with raw, explosive dominance. That is exactly how you've arrived at the terrifying peak occupied by someone like Pablo Escobar, who realized that controlling a product the entire world is addicted to means you don't just run a neighborhood, you run an entire continent. At this stage, your wealth is so massive it literally can't be counted, and your influence is backed by a private army that is often better equipped than the local military. It's a complete departure from the shadows of the mafia to the loud, brazen power of a cartel leader who treats international borders like they're just minor suggestions. This tier of power is about total market saturation and an authority built on plata o plomo, much like how Joaquin El Chapo Guzman built a global logistics network that bypassed every law enforcement agency on the planet. You aren't just selling a product, you're managing a multi-billion-dollar supply chain involving thousands of soldiers, pilots, and chemists working under your absolute command. Your influence is so heavy that you can turn entire cities into war zones or sanctuary zones just by moving your finger, making you a primary target for every intelligence agency in the world. You operate with a level of audacity that the old-school bosses wouldn't dream of, knowing that as long as the demand exists, your throne is built on solid gold. Building on that atmosphere of chaotic wealth, being a kingpin means your life is a constant high-stakes gamble, where the rewards are astronomical, but the price of failure is total destruction. Think of the sheer ruthlessness of someone like Griselda Blanco, who pioneered the most brutal tactics to ensure her empire remained untouched by any rival. At this stage, your power doesn't come from a family tree or a corporate boardroom. It comes from the massive volume of your product and the absolute brutality of your enforcers. You've mastered the art of turning fear into a business model, ensuring that everyone from the street-level dealer to the highest government official knows exactly what happens when they cross your path. Reaching this rank means you've successfully turned a shadow economy into a global powerhouse that can challenge the sovereignty of nations. While someone like Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the Lord of the Skies, focused on high-tech smuggling routes and a fleet of planes, a true kingpin understands that your greatest weapon is the sheer global necessity of what you provide. Level 7. The invisible brokers. Forget the world leaders or famous billionaires you see on TV. The real final boss is the person who makes sure those people stay in power without ever leaving a footprint. You've moved into the ghost-like existence of someone like Adnan Khashoggi in his prime, a man who acted as the ultimate middleman, brokering deals between governments and underground empires that shouldn't even exist on paper. At this stage, you don't own a country, you own the secrets of the people who do, making you an invisible broker whose phone calls can start or stop global conflicts before the public even knows there's a problem. It's the final evolution from being a visible kingpin to becoming a silent shadow that controls the very fabric of global trade and diplomacy. This peak of criminal hierarchy is about being the fixer for the 1%, someone like Mark Rich, who knew how to move commodities and cash through sanctioned borders as if they weren't even there. You aren't managing drugs or territories anymore. You're managing the flow of global necessity, oil, weapons, and data, ensuring that the world's elite get what they need, no matter how illegal it is. Your power is built on being the only person with the keys to the most restricted back doors of the financial world, making you indispensable to both the heroes and the villains of the global stage. You operate in a realm where law is just a suggestion, and sovereignty is just a hurdle you've already figured out how to jump over. Building on that layer of absolute secrecy, being an invisible broker means your identity is your most guarded weapon, much like the enigma of Victor Boot before the world finally caught his trail. At this stage, you don't fear a prison cell because your clients are the very people who sign the extradition treaties and control the high courts. You've mastered the art of being the man who isn't there, using a web of shell companies and diplomatic immunity to move through the world like a ghost. You don't want the spotlight or the fame that a godfather craves. You want the silence and the leverage that comes from knowing exactly where everybody is buried and who paid for the shovel. Reaching this ultimate rank means you've successfully transcended the physical world of crime to become a permanent fixture in the global power structure. While someone like Semyon Mogilevich showed how to blend organized crime with high-level economics, a true invisible broker knows that the greatest power isn't owning the bank, it's being the one the bank calls when they need to do something they can't admit to.